Hi, I'm Ian McClintock, founder of Charity Excellence. We are the largest and fastest growing UK charity community. This video is the findings of our 2024 benchmarking for charity sector trustees and the findings from our master data systems. So, what I'll cover: charity sector data store, the third sector crisis, why is governance performance falling, our survey data, experience, diversity, what trustees tell us they do best, and what they feel the biggest challenges are. And then what help do they need from the sector and regulators? And I've left the last one to them. You can find a link to the detailed survey results in the YouTube video details, and it's available on our website. This is the charity sector data store. It's about 750,000 data points. We can track every aspect of charity performance. And what I have leaned into this data to provide data about where the sector is at the moment and where it's been. This is the master dashboard from the charity sector. This is peak COVID. What you have on the right is the governance reporting, which is broken out by the Charity Governance Code. In the middle are the functional areas like strategy and finance, and the left-hand side is the critical health check, the things that trustees really want to know are working well. As you can see, they're not. Big issue was income. Resilience is the ability of an organisation to maintain itself within the short term. Sustainability is the strategic element, your ability to remain viable in the longer term. And what you can see is we had 4 warning indicators on the dashboard. Strategy, for example, was we've no idea what's going to happen. So strategy went by the way. Some of what Charity Excellence tracks is directly influenced by the external environment, whether you've got a pipeline of funders, whether you have enough cash to pay your bills, whether you're able to cope with the demand. All of these issues impact directly on what the system does and it moves about. Much of it should not. So the policies, the culture, the leadership, how you treat and respect the people you work with, those things do not change radically in the face of the external operating environment. I will come back to this though. So if we go to the cost of living crisis, this is Q1 of 2023. It was peak crisis as our predictive model had suggested. And what you can see is, as we were reporting at the time, the cost of living crisis was both deeper and longer than the COVID crisis. You can see the rot beginning to spread, and there's an additional indicator. Come on, this one is the ability of charities to get what funding they do have impacting into the front line to manage demand, and they were really beginning to struggle on this. So we had 4 indicators. This is my pun because it is the third sector crisis we're in. This indicator is the worst I have ever seen the dashboard in 8 years. And what we're seeing is other areas of the dashboard, such as organisational purpose, beginning to go amber. If the organisation is being driven by external events, there are large areas in this dashboard should not change. And they are changing, and they're getting worse. And they should not be. And that then begs the question, why is governance performance falling when the government's performance is not directly driven by the number of resources you have? And this is the governance table at the moment. What we think, and we do not have the data to be able to prove it, is that really this is kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. That people in charities are just so broken because it has gone on for so long that the kind of performance they were previously able to deliver, they no longer can do. They're just too burned out, they're just too overworked, and the key internal systems are beginning to fail. Organizational purpose is about impact. That's not of nothing to do with the resources. It measures the extent to which the charity is using its resources as effectively as possible. It's internal value chain analysis for those of you that like that kind of thing. But in theory, it's working out how well the trustees are using their resources, and it's falling. So they're getting less good at it. If you look at the overall governance scores, this is what they look like through from 2019 to 24. Since 2022, governance performance within the sector has been falling. It is continuing to fall. We can see no indication that it is bottoming out. So, what the trustees told us. Firstly, what about your experience as a trustee? It's reasonably well distributed. It's very similar to last year. There's been no significant change. I'd be surprised if there was. The governance code says that, you really shouldn't be a trustee for more than about 9 years. So you can see there is a big chunk of our trustees, in actual fact, are rather longer in the tooth than they should be. However, I would say that's about overall trustee experience. I mean, I've been a chair for a quarter of a century, but not with the same charities. So in a sense, this is not necessarily a good measure. And the other thing is, I reckon that's a nice spread because you want new people coming in, you want older people moving on, more experienced people moving on. It's saying if you put all of the trustees in a single room, this is what it would look like. What it is not actually looking at, and where we do need to do more work, is what does the breakdown of experience with individual trustee boards look like? Because that's what's actually driving it. So we don't really know, but that's reasonably okay. In terms of trustee diversity, that hasn't changed terribly much since last year either. And here is a breakdown of what you can see. What I have done is I have then turned it into ONS data. And I've said, well, actually, okay, if that's the percentage within the charities, what does that look like within the general populace? Now, we have to be careful with this data. This is really no more than indicative. Firstly, this is about people saying that they were, and a number of people skipped. I have adjusted for that, but actually we can take it there are more people who are LGBTIQ plus because not everyone would have said, because there's no reason why they should have to. Also, my extraction of the ONS data was slightly complicated and I had to use Microsoft's Copilot for that. So I'm running this on AI. Copilot's reasonably good, but it does make mistakes. And the complexity of the equations I was asking it to run, I cannot absolutely verify them. So you do need to take this with a pinch of salt. However, it is indicative. And what we can see is those that appear to be really underrepresented are young people, and then followed behind by the Black and Asian community and the people in our disabled community. So those it is suggesting are the people that we should most need to focus on. But trustees, you have to be at least 16 years old. I took that into account. So what trustees feel they do best? What really came through was listening again and again and again. That was the strongest thing. That's really good. But also things like working collaboratively, collective decision making, supporting the CEO and management. This is in general. And those are all the kind of things that we would want to see there. And looking across the piece, there was no massive theme. That in actual fact, there was a very good spread of skills. So if we actually look at what they said they specifically did, making the time going to meetings, getting the values, vision, the mission and strategy, understanding governance and their role as the trustee, understanding the governing document, the policies, procedures, but also behaviours about understanding the debate round the table, contributing to it, being listened to, having a good relationship with the chair, understanding how I as a trustee can best contribute. So when I looked through it, actually, it was really heartening because it was a mixture of the necessary skills and understanding that you would expect of trustees, yet at the same time, the behaviours came through strongly as well, suggesting that actually the trustee mix is pretty good and they are doing a good job. What they felt they were more challenged about. At fundraising, it just keeps coming up in every single conversation I have about anything. Recruiting is now a struggle. People find that really difficult. Partly, I think, it's people under pressure, that perhaps they're volunteering less. Certainly, in terms of recruiting staff, the charity sector pay gap with both the public sector and the private sector has significantly widened. There was a pay gap there already. The recent public sector pay increases will have widened it still further. So that is unquestionably going to be a problem for us. And also, they felt the need for long-term planning and strategy. And what the trustees were saying, when I go back and I look at the core master data sets, you can see that there is pretty much a tie off there and that it fits and it makes sense. So that actually gave us confidence that we're probably getting reasonably close to where we should be. What did they specifically say? Accountability to stakeholders, support fundraising, oversight of key issues, adequate debate, seeking the views of beneficiaries and ensuring they're acted on. My development, I'm being supported in meeting my development needs, and that collectively we as a board have got the skills and experience that we need. Themes within that, accountability to stakeholders can be really quite difficult. Actually, people often feel they're great at it. We're not really. This is an area where we do need to act. The other one is fundraising. Fundraising is absolutely dire. There is no question about that. Everybody's well aware of it. Why are trustees not supporting the fundraising efforts? And that, I think, is something that would be worth looking into in more depth and seeing if we could do, because we could actually get more. And the two bottom ones, these are the two worst, the biggest challenges they face are around development and skills and experience. So that's an area where the sector could act to do far more to support our trustees. And given that getting on board, we're actually really good at that kind of thing, the fact that charity grant makers wouldn't support them and that they went into insolvency and we lost them is an absolute shame. So what sector level support did the trustees tell us they wanted? Funding, funnily enough. But that was not quantum. Yes, we do need a lot more funding, and there's a gap. But what we need is we need core funding. We need multi-year funding, not grant makers continuing to fund, the projects that they feel attracted to. We want to fund those projects as much as anyone else does, but funding those projects when we're struggling to keep the lights on is really difficult. We also heard about grant applications, about support for small charities in writing applications. Sometimes these could be really complex and demanding. Some of the lottery applications, I wouldn't even dream to write myself. I would go and speak to a professional if I wanted to do that, asking for simpler, less bureaucratic processes. Pre-COVID, I mean, there is no such thing as benchmarking success, but rule of thumb was if it was a warm funder, maybe 3 to 1. If it was a cold funder, maybe 10 to 1. Those ratios are far, far larger now, 15 and 20 to 1 success rates, which means that charities are now having to write far, far, far more bids in order to secure the same level of funding if they can. And so when funders are saying, actually, we're working really hard and we're helping the charities, if they're having to write 20 funding bids to get a couple of £1,000 out of you, that's questionable. So in actual fact, there is a great deal that funders could do. And at sector level, strategic sector-wide action. Why do we not have a charity sector recovery plan? And what do they want from the regulators? It was the same thing. And mentions around government, local authority commissioners, the Charity Commission, quite a few suggested that small charity specific guidance. If you write this in great big long complicated civil service bureaucratic talk, then a lot of the people who are running those little community groups just really, really struggle with that and they just can't access it. The Charity Commission guidance, how about quick and simple stuff for the wee guys? And just to recognize that they have less capacity and skills. So simple, clear guidance. So they do need more. They need development. They need to be able to recruit people. They need funding. But actually, it's about how that is presented to them. And actually, grant makers, the sector, and the Charity Commission and regulators, there is a lot more that we could do that would provide support that isn't measured in the money that we don't have. And I'll leave the final word to the trustees themselves. This one, I've no idea who wrote it, kind of summed it up. The whole way the sector governance, regulation, and funding go round works seems to feel painfully, devastatingly inefficient. Why are so many talented and knowledgeable people with the potential to improve people's lives, our society, the world at large, so much tied to their desks, battling bureaucratic processes and systems and trying to persuade others that they are worthy of being given some of your money? Why is it so much funding is diverted to middlemen and wasted on patronising and excessive grant administration? That's what they told us. We can't fix the funding, but there is a great deal that we can do to support our trustees. And what I'm asking the sector and regulators is, can we now do it, please? Thank you.